Hello, my name is Isabel Rimanossi, and I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person, but at least I will send this video, so a little bit of me is there with you. What I'm going to share with you is a little story about caterpillars and butterflies. I always loved butterflies. I loved the softness, the delicacy of their wings. As a kid, I was told I should never touch them because they have a soft powder on their wings, and if I would touch them, they would not be able to fly. I don't know if that is true, but the colors, the erratic flight pattern, their attraction to flowers, and also their custom to sleep hanging on their tiny feet, all that fascinates me. I knew that in some traditions, butterflies are a symbol for the soul or the spirit. I even tattooed a few on my back. And then one day, I read a phrase that profoundly touched me. It said, just when he thought it was the end, the caterpillar became a butterfly. This phrase spoke to me because of my many moments of despair, confusion, uncertainty, and lack of direction. It spoke to my numerous days when I lost hope. I no longer understood how the world is working, when I felt at the end of my resources or the end of my imagination. Yet, something always happened after that. In some strange ways, the depth of my angst, the darkness of my night was followed by a dawn of a new idea, a new light of hope, a new direction that I hadn't imagined before. Sometimes it came through a person or a conversation, something I had read or heard. Whatever the trigger was, something radically changed, and looking back, I felt like I was in a totally new chapter in my life. When I read a phrase about a caterpillar, thinking it was the end, and yet becoming a butterfly, I understood the connection between my darkest moment and what followed. I had gone through several caterpillar-butterfly processes. So I became curious about how the caterpillar became that wingy fairy, and I did some scientific exploration. I learned about what really happens inside the cocoon. And if you haven't studied butterflies, we will have a short biology lessons now. To begin with, the caterpillar is born out of a tiny egg. And once he is out, he makes his way to adulthood by shedding his skin many times. Now, I know many animals do this. Even we shed our old cells. However, caterpillars outgrow their container, so to say. They become fatter and larger, but the skin is not elastic. So at some point, they wiggle their new being out of their smaller sized self, leaving behind a complete hull, all in one piece. Even their face falls off, like a mask. That was the first fact that fascinated me. Let me share why. I'm a scholar, an academic, teaching and researching on how to create a more sustainable world. I'm obsessed with what we need to do to develop a new generation of compassionate, empowered, innovative young people who can get into action to address the many challenges we are facing. I studied business leaders championing sustainability initiatives, seeking to understand why they acted in unconventional ways. What motivated them? Where did they find the inspiration to reshape their organizations for a more responsible contribution to the planet? What I found was that they had a particular way of looking at information through systems thinking. But there was more. Looking into the face of facts about the state of their planet, they ask themselves, how are we being part of the problem? How am I contributing to this? They developed introspective habits and got in touch with their feelings. They asked themselves deep questions, such as, who am I? Why am I here? What is my mission, my purpose? They paused and reflected on the deep-held values and noticed that they were not the person they wanted to be. They felt uneasy, uncomfortable, inadequate, anxious. The cognitive dissonance between how they thought of themselves and how they were acting became a tension impossible to sustain. That tension, in my findings, was the most powerful trigger for change, for action. I cannot not do something, one leader said. They had to face their peers, in some cases their executive team, other leaders, even their boards, advocating for a change while having no clue how the company could ever manufacture shoes without chemical glue, or products without waste, or food without preservatives. Like the caterpillar, they went through several iterations of dropping their mask, exposing a new face, outgrowing the narrow self, albeit smart, but no longer sufficient. They wiggled and came out of themselves over and over, many times. When I was learning about this shedding process of the worm, I couldn't help but think of the many times I had shed myself. Small transformations, outgrowing beliefs, my ways to see the world, dropping masks, finding a more authentic self. I thought of comments and reflections from my students as they began to be exposed to facts, and I asked them, yes, it is true that 1 in 6 people on the planet have access to safe and clean drinking water, and no more than that. But what does that mean for you? How does that relate to your life? Question by question, the students also went through phases of shedding, expanding their views of themselves and the views of the world. Can you see why we are having this biology class today? Then I learned about the next fascinating stage. This happens when the caterpillar no longer becomes larger and fatter, but it becomes something totally different, a butterfly. So how does this happen? What is there for me to learn? So, as many of you may know, at some point the caterpillar stops eating. He hangs himself on a branch and begins to spin a net around himself. Its cocoon. He spits and weaves his coffin. When it is complete, he disintegrates inside it. If we would poke a hole inside the cocoon at the right moment, we would not see the caterpillar anymore. Instead, a gooey soup would flow out. But this is not any soup. It is a very special one. It is a bunch of imaginal cells that are the messy start of the butterfly. Interestingly, I found out the unborn caterpillar, when he still was in his egg, has already inside its body some cells called the imaginal disc cells. They are the foundation for the future butterfly, for the antenna, for the wing, the legs, the eyes. These imaginal cells stay dormant inside the worm. And when the worm's own enzymes begin to disintegrate its caterpillar shape, the imaginal cells come front stage. They begin multiplying, nurtured by the past of the worm, so to say. Some studies even showed that the emerging butterfly keeps memories from the caterpillar's life experience. So multiplying and multiplying, the imaginal cells shape up, and one day the butterfly is ready and eats its way out of the cocoon. Transformation done. Now this was another fascinating analogy. I had been able to recall many anxious moments where I was shedding into small enlightenments, but at some point it didn't work anymore for me to be a worm interested in sustainability. I arrived to a point where I could not shed one more outgrown belief. I realized that I was no longer who I had been. However, I was not yet what I was meant to be. I spun my symbolic cocoon, using meditation, walks in nature, writing, trying to find words and metaphors, the imaginal cells of who I was to become. I had painstaking moments where I knew where my place was not, but I had no idea what my place would look like. I had anxiety-filled days where I felt like I was hitting a wall, and I reframed it as though I were a blind person, feeling my way along. I saw myself walking on a long bridge, having left one shore, still not yet on the other side. The enzymes of my readings helped disintegrate the former being that was no longer fit, while the imaginal cells of the best I could be began to take center stage. I awakened. They were nurtured by the experience of my past, by the lessons I had learned, and they multiplied towards who I was meant to be, serving the highest purpose of my being. Midway there, I was afraid I could become the worm again, but it didn't happen. The process goes only one way, and once we listen and make space to our imaginal best, there's no way back. It was not difficult to see this transformation happening to others around me, to my students, as they reached the point of no return, where they made radical changes. For example, they changed where they lived, where they worked, or who they wanted to be. I also saw it in the leaders I had studied, and in a few friends. I'm sure the process is not unfamiliar to yourself, and that you may recognize yourself in some of these images. So back to my role as an educator, as a researcher and an academic. I came to realize that we are good at helping students get information, analyze data, draw conclusions, even imagine solutions. We are good at navigating with them the outer landscape of sustainability. We are not so comfortable taking them on the journey of the inner landscape of sustainability. The journey that is intimate, personal, where we don't have a say, at the most, a question. Where our words don't count, but we can do a lot with silence. Where what we know doesn't matter, but the questions they ask themselves mean the world to them. Where we are not in charge, we are simply accompanying them on their path. Where our main task may be to provide a safe place, a challenging question, a time to slow down, the permission to just sit and reconnect with their imaginal selves, so that they, in turn, can spin their own cocoon, nurture who they can be with what they no longer want to be, dream themselves into the best version of themselves. Maybe this is the most simple, yet most powerful role we can play. to help a new generation of leaders emerge compassionate, self-aware, engaged, young people who will shape a better world for all of us. Thank you very much.